today's case is about 3 teenage girls. As you can see, they look very much like the typical girls you will see in every high school across America and maybe across the world. But their story is not typical. Skylar Neese was born on February 10th, 1996, in a town called Star City, West Virginia, and that is where this case takes place. She had 2 loving parents, and she was an only child, so she was their world. She was an honor student, and she worked a job at Wendy's to make some cash. She was known to be a very reliable worker and never missed a day or was late. Sheila Eddy had been a good friend of Skylar's since they were both 8 years old. Sheila was a child of divorce, and she was also an only child. She was kind of a free-spirited, fun-loving, wild child kind of person. But Skylar's parents came to really like her and treated her as one of the family, even allowing her to just enter the house without knocking or anything. Then in 9th grade, a new girl moved to town, and her name was Rachel Schoaf. She was also an only child of a divorced family, but her family was extremely religious. So she really enjoyed the company of Sheila, who was so wild and so different from herself. And the 3 of them became best friends, inseparable, always together. And Skylar was their rock. She was the most stable of them, and was oftentimes giving out advice and such. And it also dawned on me that the fact that all 3 were only children probably strengthened their bond, because they didn't have someone else at home, another child at home to spend time with or bond with. If they wanted to have, any socialization, they needed to do that with friends. So I think that's a little meaningful. Anyway, at some point when they were all 16, the relationship started getting a little shaky. And we're really never told exactly why 100%. It's really not known. But it was like Skylar had become a third wheel, and she was excluded a lot. And she was posting things on Twitter or Facebook talking about how she was angry and she couldn't trust them and that kind of thing. And other kids from the school were able to talk about it as well, stating that things were happening, like so something was up there. And then on the night of July 6th, 2012, Skylar was invited by Rachel and Sheila to hang out. And she was kind of like, what, you know? They weren't getting along clearly, and there was a rift. So I guess she wasn't quite sure, but I mean, she certainly didn't think anything, you know, too out of sorts was gonna happen. I mean, why would she? So she agreed to hang out with them. Fast forward to the next day. Both parents wake up, they go to work. It's early. They're not looking for Skylar at that point because she is assumed to be asleep. The father comes home from work to find that Skylar's door was still closed, which was odd, so he went inside and found her bed was still made, and her window was open. The screen had been removed, and there was a stool, like a little step stool, outside the window, like on the outside of the house. It was the first floor for her to step down onto, or possibly for someone to step up, you know, in, like he doesn't know what happened to her. But he does note that she had not taken her phone charger, her toiletries, or even her contact lens supplies. And if you're a contact lens wearer, then you know you're not going anywhere overnight without that. You know that as a fact. You can't sleep in your lenses. And even if you could, you'd still need the drops or this or that. So that does not seem like she ran away. So he calls his wife. She doesn't know anything. And shortly after, they get a phone call from Wendy's saying she hasn't shown up. And like I said earlier, that was not like her. So they went straight to the police, who said, hey, look, she's a teenager and we can't put out an Amber Alert for every teenager that goes missing for a few hours. There are, you know, protocol. It has to be 48 hours, and there has to be the real presumption of a kidnapping and all that. Meanwhile, Sheila calls up the mother and says, I have to tell you something. She says, last night, myself and Rachel hung out with your daughter, Skylar. We picked her up at 11. We went out and smoked weed. And then we brought her back at 12. And we dropped her on the street in front of your house. We didn't pull into the driveway because she didn't want the car to wake you. And that's the last we saw of her, so we don't know what happened. So they told that to the police. after she's released from that hospital, she goes straight over to the police station. And here's what she said. She said, "We stabbed her." And she proceeds to explain what happened that fateful night. So they had planned it a month ahead of time when they were in science class. They did not like Skylar. That is the reason that they gave, and there is no other reason that is given. We did not like her, and we did not want to be friends with her. That's it. So we devised a plan. So that night, they gathered some supplies. They got a shovel, they got some kitchen knives, they got some fresh clothing for themselves, some bleach, some towels or something maybe. And they went and they picked up Skylar. They drove about 30 miles away, I think, right over the border of West Virginia into Pennsylvania. I'm not sure exactly why, if that was just the spot that they had chosen for no real reason, but it was a different state. Just a wooded area off the side of the road, and they got out and they were going to go smoke pot. So when they got out to wherever it was that they were going to sit down in the woods, one of them said, "Oh, we forgot the lighter. Hey, Skylar, can you go back to the car and get the lighter?" So she's like, "Sure." And as she turned to go, they counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. And then they both started stabbing. And they stabbed her 50 times until she stopped gurgling, they said. And all she could do was say, "Why?" Those were her last words. And I wish we really did know why. But, so then they took out their shovel and tried to dig like a grave, but the ground was too hard. So they just covered her with leaves and twigs and rocks, and they left. And I guess it worked because nobody found her. They changed their clothes as well, and they wiped down the car or anything that might have gotten dirty. So even having confessed that, it wasn't enough. Believe it or not, it wasn't enough to arrest Rachel or Sheila. Shockingly. They had no body. So, Rachel brought them to the wooded area, and they looked for the body, but there was snow at the time, and they couldn't find it that night. But ultimately, they did find the body. And it was announced that the body was discovered on March 13th, 2013. So think about how long that was. The incident happened on July 6th, 2012, and the body was discovered on March 13th, 2013. prison, as they called it, with mercy, and she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. So that is the case. Now, in addition to that, Skylar's parents helped to get a new law passed in their state, which was called Skylar's Law, and that was in April of 2013. And this was a law which said that it was no longer necessary for people to wait 48 hours to get an Amber Alert for a missing child. Any child who was possibly in danger would get an immediate Amber Alert, even though that would have had no effect on their case, because by the time they went to the police, their child was already gone. But think about it, they didn't know that. They probably went through, I know they went through hell at that moment, thinking, come on, put out an Amber Alert, you know. So that motivated them to help to get this passed, which will be helpful to a lot of parents in the future. So a few words on this case. Why would these girls need or want to kill a girl that they just decided they don't like anymore? Well, a lot of people have said that it's because Rachel and Sheila had actually become lovers, and Skylar had seen them together, engaged in something, and she had threatened to expose them. Now, I could see how they wouldn't like that, but to kill over it, especially in this day and age when, it's not that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? It's not uncommon at this time. So, that just doesn't make sense to me. Plus, it would be her word against theirs anyway. They could say that never happened, she's just making it up. It just doesn't seem like enough of a reason for people to kill. So I had heard one of the police officers in the case. She was talking about why she thinks they did it, and she said just for the thrill of it, that's it. And that must be it. Because I can see no other reason whatsoever at all. And Sheila obviously was the ringleader because she clearly felt nothing about it. And what she did with the parents, like, come on now. Pretending to care so much over the top like that, having them console her. Imagine if you were consoling the girl who killed your daughter and you found out about that afterwards. Horrible. So, once again, we just come to find that there are people out there that surprise us every day, unfortunately, with this kind of thing, and cause us